This is The Joe Gaither Show on BamaCentral.com.
Good afternoon, Tuscaloosa, Internet World, West Alabama. How we doing today on this Thursday, May 23rd? We're almost done with the month of May. Oh my gosh, I hope your summer is going well if you're into summer mode. And if you're not quite there yet, I hope you get there soon. We're going to have a fun show today on the Joe Gaither Show. You're watching us on the Bama Central YouTube channel. You're watching us on my own YouTube channels, Twitter and Facebook as well, at Joe Gaither 6. You can find me right there. Subscribe, rate, review, whatever platform that you like on social medias. And you can always find me on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon, the Joe Gaither Show. You can subscribe, rate, and review the show right there on your favorite podcast platforms. Going to do a little bit of something different again today, as we did on on Monday with our friend Austin Bidwell inside the Royals. We're going to start the show by talking about the NCAA lawsuits. Basically, there's a huge lawsuit, and these athletes, former and current athletes, are about to get paid a really big, really pretty penny. We'll talk about the NCAA lawsuits, and then we're going to welcome on my friend Matt Guzman. Matt Guzman, he's been on the program before talking about the Missouri Tigers, but now he's working with Inside the Spurs. And so we're going to stretch our wings a little bit on the Walsh Writing Network and step out to San Antonio and figure out what's going on with the San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, their season is well over. They're preparing for the NBA draft. We're going to do kind of a lot of NBA topics with our friend Matt Guzman as we continue to try to expand our coverage right here on the Joe Gaither Show. As always, you can leave me a comment, question, query, or complaint at Joe Gaither 6 on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube if you want to do it live or whatever your favorite social media platform is. You can find me right there. All right, so let's get right into it. It is there's a lot going on in Washington and really a lot going on with the NCAA. College athletes on the brink of getting $2.8 billion with a B, and really getting a lot of things. Looks like future revenue sharing is down the pipe for some of these Power 5 schools. It looks like maybe there's going to be a salary cap implemented. It sounds like you're getting some of the controls that a lot of people have been clamoring for over the last, 3 years since NIL has been in place. You're getting a lot of these controls, it sounds like, but it's going to come at a pretty significant cost. Okay. What are the basics? If you haven't been paying attention, and that's A-okay, the basics are essentially there's a class action lawsuit of former athletes trying to say, oh, we lost out on money. NCAA Board of Governors voting on Wednesday to accept the antitrust lawsuit settlement. These former athletes have come together to basically say we lost out on money when we weren't allowed to take part in NIL. And okay, I understand that, and I understand them feeling butthurt about that and wanting to, we missed the boat on NIL. And obviously, you got big-time athletes in the past that could have made a lot of money. You've heard about Johnny Manziel before. He's gone on podcasts and shows before talking about the money that he made under the table and how much money he thought he really could have made in the NIL era. And he's absolutely right. I have no idea if Johnny is involved in this class action lawsuit, just using him as an example here for an athlete that would have made a lot of money. Where we're at now is they've been in litigation, they've been in negotiation, and essentially what you've got is the NCAA and the defendants, basically the House versus the NCAA. The NCAA is the defendants. They're working toward a settlement. Because I think, much like the Supreme Court case that ruled 9-0 in favor of the athletes, 3-4 years ago, that really kicked this ball off rolling, I think the NCAA knows they're on the losing side, knows that, okay, we have been taking advantage of these athletes. And it is right that we should be sharing a piece of the pie with these athletes. And what you're going to get is a revenue sharing model that could decimate a lot of college sports. All right, so you have the Big 12 and the ACC have all agreed to a settlement. It looks like the Big 10 is next on board. SEC is supposed to be determining whether they're going to be agreeing to the settlement or not today. And so you're about to see all these big entities in college athletics be on board with, oh my gosh, we're about to be paying out $2.8 billion in a class action lawsuit. And obviously, I think it's going to be handled on payments. They're not going to be just dropping $2.8 billion right in a pot and dividing it up right off the bat. It's got to be separated, and it's got to be, over time, they're going to take care of this. And obviously, and no, not every conference is going to pay $2.8 billion. It's going to be divided up. And that's really where a lot of the argument is. Who's responsible for how much money? Who's responsible for this $2.8 billion? How is it going to be divided up? How is it going to be allocated? And whose rear end, whose budget is it going to be coming out of? And so you're seeing lots of movement behind closed doors. I think the $2.8 billion is good for the headlines, is big for the headlines. It draws people in. They see a big number, and you say, oh, why don't they fight it? Well, if they fight it, there's reports and kind of narratives out there that if the court made a ruling, it might be up to $4 or $5 billion. And so it's best, obviously, if you're not familiar with the legal system, usually best to work things out outside of court if possible. And that's kind of what these entities are going tit for tat back and forth on. I think the $2.8 billion captures your headline. I think that it gets people to click on your stories, and obviously it is a big aspect. But I wonder if the bigger aspect is the revenue sharing model that is apparently getting attached to this in the settlements. And you're seeing some athletic directors make some comments to where you're needing some of these athletic institutions to start to basically create a revenue line, a line item, where they're going to be paying out to these athletes $15 to $20 million a year. And we're talking about schools like Ohio State and Alabama and Texas and USC. We're not talking about schools like Jacksonville State, like South Alabama. Now, I think there will be some revenue sharing and some money going into the pockets from the universities and from the conferences to those smaller schools, but it won't be at that $15 to $20 million mark. And so I think, okay, what's this going to do for Alabama? What's this going to do for Missouri and Mississippi State, the other schools that we cover on the Walsh Writing Network? Probably going to hurt Missouri and Mississippi State more. But I go to my friend Nick Kelly, who writes for the Tuscaloosa News, and in February, he wrote the annual How Much Money Did Alabama Athletics Make and Spend? And so you'll look through his article, and it's right there on the Tuscaloosa News in February. The Crimson Tide this past season reported $199 million in total operating revenue. And so you think, oh, great, yeah, they can afford $15 to $20 million out of that for the athletes, maybe. But they also reported $212 million in total operating expenses. Now, I'm no math major. I did a little bit of basic algebra in college. I know that 212 is more than 199. Not by a whole lot, but it's still in the red. And now that's just last year. You look back the year prior, it flips just a little bit. The 2022 fiscal year, Alabama reported $214 million in total operating revenue, while the flip side, $195 million in operating expenses. All right, so they made money in 2022. They lost money in 2023. Now, obviously, there's accounting that comes into play there, and when you're allocating budgets and capital projects that go into this as well. Alabama currently working on a capital project with the Alabama men's and women's golf program. That golf course, the little practice facility, it looks beautiful. And it should. They're, national championship worthy teams. I mean, they're worthy programs. They compete at a high level in college athletics, and they should have their own place to practice. But you see, this is why maybe Alabama operating a little bit in the red in 2023. So will Alabama be able to afford $15 to $20 million? Look, this all goes back into a different conversation about the way that really colleges are funded, the way that college athletics are funded. Obviously, football, carrying the water, and basically paying for a lot of the other non-revenue sports. You see basketball, men's basketball, making a little bit of money. You see gymnastics sometimes breaking even, but usually in the red. You see softball sometimes breaking even, but usually in the red. Same with women's basketball, sometimes breaking even. And so it's really football and a little bit of men's basketball. I mean, men's basketball is not making a lot of money, but it usually is in the green just a little bit. This all goes into a discussion on, the financial structure of colleges. And it's been broken for, goodness gracious, ever since I was around. I mean, no, look, I'm not an old man, but it's been broken forever. You look at really the cost of attendance has gone up because anybody can go take out a student loan and basically get themselves into college. They'll give you, here's your $50,000 loan for your college, but you won't get it for your business. And so the financial structure has been broken for a long, long time. Now, it breaks my heart on this track. Alabama's going to be able to afford the $15 to $20 million. And some of these bigger programs, Ohio State's going to be able to afford the $15 to $20 million revenue sharing model that's coming down the line. And it is coming down the line. What they're not going to be able to afford is they're going to say, if we can scratch volleyball, if we can scratch rowing, if we can scratch, just name it. And these are non-revenue sports. Name your non-revenue sport that the athletic director is going to have to say, you know what, we appreciate all that you've done for the last 30 years, but you're getting scratched. How do you rectify the budget? Who stays on campus? Who stays on campus? And then you take your $15 to $20 million. Who in the world, how do you divide it? Does it all go to football? Does it all go to football with a little bit of consideration for basketball? Does every athlete in college get a piece of the pie? And is it all even? You heard Nick Saban over time. I want my players to have even money. Well, does the quarterback get a whole lot more money because he's the face of the program? How are you going to divide that payment up amongst your athletic department? I think it's going to be, oh my gosh, you're going to get bogged down in so much red tape, so much mud that I wonder what the fate of college athletics are at the moment. Obviously, I think that we have dropped the veil and moved past the amateurism that, these guys are amateur athletes and these girls are amateur athletes. No, they're not. They're basically playing in a semi-professional level. And if you're playing Power 5 football, if you're playing SEC football, you're basically playing professional football. And so I think that you're going to have some athletic directors make some very, very difficult decisions going forward. And then you throw in the factor that Title IX is not going to be going away. Title IX is not going to say, we're cool with you cutting women's soccer. We're cool with you cutting women's tennis, whatever the case may be. No, they're not. And they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be. So this is all going to be a painful thing. And look, don't blame the athletes. You're going to have a lot of people, the greedy athletes, you're getting a scholarship, the greedy athlete. No, what this is basically these college athletics programs and these colleges as a whole, basically it's time to pay the piper. You have been using these athletes for the last, 50, 100 years and saying, here you go to class. Here's your math class is free today, Billy. Thanks. We appreciate that. Your math class is free, and you have to make a certain GPA to stay eligible to give us your labor. It's not the athlete's fault that the colleges never really took them into consideration when they were basically constructing their financial models. So you're going to see narratives where, these greedy athletes, they just want more and more and more. This $15 to $20 million, it's roughly equating to 20% of these media revenue pies. You're still getting 80% of the media revenue. So you're still coming out really, really good. Imagine, I get 80%, 80 cents of every dollar and you get 20. Well, over time, I'm still doing really, really good. It's just the, corporate greed, the kind of honestly broken financial model over the last 100 years finally coming to fruition and becoming, it's not getting fixed, but it's getting straightened out. And it's going to be a very complicated situation and system. I'm looking forward to see what happens. I'm hopeful, at least from a selfish standpoint, that no sports get cut. but I think it'd be naive to say that they won't be. I think you will see, even right here at the University of Alabama, there's 23, 24 scholarship sports. I wonder if you're going to be dipping down into the teens because, oh my gosh, you can't afford to keep X or Y or Z non-revenue sport because you got to pay the athletes on campus $15 to $20 million. It's going to be a bear. And really, in this off-season time where we're kind of wrapping up college sports, you're watching college baseball and softball wrap up their seasons, this is the big thing. All these administrators, I think, are really worried about what's going to be happening. What's going to be happening in their own departments, what's going to be happening with their sports that they're managing and over. I think it's going to be a really complicated situation, and unfortunately, I think it's going to lead to cuts. But honestly, I think it leads to cuts because of the broken model that these colleges have taken advantage of basically throughout my entire lifetime. We're going to be watching the NCAA and kind of following the rest of this case as it comes to fruition. The SEC is expected to agree to the settlement today, $2.8 billion settlement. The Pac-12, the two-team Pac-12 is set to be in agreement as well today. So we'll see if those two conferences do ultimately basically bite the bullet and agree to this $2.8 billion settlement. Really, that's going to do it for my non-professional sports take today. I'm going to be welcoming in a friend that's been on the program before. Matt Guzman joins us from Inside the Spurs. He's joined us before covering Missouri Central, but now covering all things Spurs. And you guys want to make sure you read him at Inside the Spurs. I guess we're changing the name to Spurs SI. We're still working on a little bit of a change there. But if you just type Inside the Spurs into Google, it'll be the first result that pops up, and you'll be able to read all of Matt's great work. Matt's had a fun season covering the Rookie of the Year, covering an alien. Matt, first, thanks so much for joining us. Hope your day's going well. And
yeah, it's been good. I appreciate you having me on. This means a lot. It's always good to be on Joe Gaither.
Tell us what it's like covering an alien.
You know, it's definitely an experience. The first time I ever saw Victor, I mean, obviously the first thing you notice is how tall he is, but I kind of wanted to put it into perspective for myself. So I was like, okay, where do I go as far as like my head? And so I looked at him and I figured out the middle of his back was the top of my head. And I was like, this is insane. You know, because you're still looking up, like there's just, it's something special. It definitely is. You know, in every game, it seems he pulls something new out of his hat trick or out of his magic hat. You know, he's doing behind the back dunks. He's doing step back 3-pointers. He's taking 2 steps from half court to get a dunk. You know, it's just ridiculous. It's definitely an exciting time, and it's fun. It's fun to watch him. So.
Well, you can follow Matt Guzman on the Twitter machine at Matt Guzman without the U. So it's all one word, Matt GZ Man. Matt GZ Man. That'll be an easy way to roll off the tongue. Make sure you're following him for all of his great coverage for the Spurs. It's about to be draft season, and really we want to know what the Spurs are going to be doing to improve the roster. We saw the number 1 pick. Okay, he was awesome, Rookie of the Year. But then you look at the record, 22-60. Ugh. Third, fourth from the bottom in the entire league. What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth from the bottom in the entire league. So the uneducated might say, oh, he wasn't that good.
Well, I think that the uneducated forgets that Rome wasn't built in a day. And that's been I think the ultimate payoff of Victor showing up to San Antonio this season has just been what he's brought to the table. Now, obviously, the Spurs were in the similar position right before him, just the year before. That's why they were in the lottery in the first place. They haven't found the success that they're used to having as of late. And so bringing in Victor was supposed to change that, but it was also supposed to change that over time. And I think that is still very much in play. Victor is the only rookie to be on an all-NBA defensive team. He was a runner-up for the Defensive Player of the Year. And not to mention, he got some votes for All-NBA. He won Rookie of the Year unanimously. I mean, he did everything that he needed to do on the court to prove that he was the guy that the Spurs can build around. Now, just because he doesn't come in and make the Spurs a 50-win team, honestly, to me, says a little bit more about the rest of the league and the kind of talent it has, because obviously Tim Duncan and David Robinson, who came before him, were able to have that kind of turnaround in their first season. None of that says that Victor had I guess, a disappointing rookie season. He just definitely is going to need some more time. The Spurs are looking to take a more patient approach around him. But just watching him play, he has everything that he needs to have. Off court, he's really great too. He's very he's a stoic for sure. He's very thoughtful with his responses, and he makes sure that he's making himself the best person, not just basketball player he can be. And I think he fits the culture in San Antonio really well.
Ooh, what about the coach that we keep hearing about from inside the NBA? Galveston's not a good place. I mean, you're following the Spurs, you're following San Antonio. Is Charles Barkley giving San Antonio a bad rap?
Well, he's always had that beef with San Antonio. It's been fun to watch over the years. I'll give it to him. Galveston is not a pretty place. The Texas beaches have never been pretty. And you're in Alabama. I'm sure Gulf Shores is miles and miles better. So he's got his quirks. Now you mentioned that Inside the NBA show. I'm sure you heard about the news. And that, honestly, I don't know how I feel about that.
It's pretty heartbreaking. People who are living under a rock and may not know, TNT has basically lost the rights to the NBA. And with that, the Inside the NBA, you got Ernie Johnson, you got Kenny the Jet Smith, Charles Barkley, and Shaquille O'Neal basically running that panel pre- and post-game. And right. It's been pure comedy as well as pretty high-level basketball insight. Absolutely. It sounds like it's going away. What do you make about the NBA's new – we'll put the Inside the NBA in a little box. What do you make about the bigger picture? The NBA going to ESPN, going to Amazon, going to basically signing a new humongous mega rights deal that, at least for the Spurs perspective, is going to get Victor Wembanyama paid a stupid amount of money. Absolutely. What's the overall thought on the NBA moving homes for its coverage?
Yeah, well, I think that it's going to be hard to ignore what will be lost from TNT. It's a classic NBA and TNT. You tune into those big games, but I don't think you can blame the league for going with a deal that is going to make them more money, because as the years progress, the NBA is actually going to continue to get richer. It's always been kind of trailing.
Clay Travis that.
Say that one more time.
Don't tell Clay Travis that.
You're right. Well, it's always kind of been trailing behind the NFL as far as viewership. It's less popular, but it's on the upward. And so as the NBA is kind of shopping around, figuring out who can pay them to put their games on TV, it's going to go with different vendors if TNT isn't able to make that kind of deal. Now, I did a story last year, the Thunder star, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's likely to be the first $400 million NBA player when his contract extension comes up in a few seasons. And that's just because these new TV deals are going to allow the NBA and its players to get paid more. I firmly believe that Victor Wembanyama will have a $500 million contract in his career. That maybe it's not this upcoming one in a few years, but the one after that, he is absolutely going to be one of the benefactors of this new deal. And it's just the NBA looking to stay relevant and make sure that, they're staying afloat and doing what they need to do to get as much money as they can. Obviously, sometimes that comes with the casualty of something like Inside the NBA, and that's rough. Fans loved it, and I personally loved the show. But at the end of the day, that's kind of the bigger picture, is they can't ignore all this money that can be thrown at them.
How many Lego sets can you buy with $500 million?
I'm sure you could buy every one. That's wild.
What do you think about that being Victor Wembanyama's kind of hobby? You see guys, I'm into music, I'm into this, I'm into that, and maybe some guys aren't into maybe some of the things that are on the up and up, and that's their business. But Victor Wembanyama's into Legos. What do you think about that being the hobby of the superstar for the Spurs?
I just think it's a testament to his character. Everything about him so far has just been unique. He shows up and he tells everybody, I want to be good at everything, including media. And we're sitting here like, okay, this is amazing. Like, we love this. Win or lose, he's the guy that they bring out of the locker room. And he holds himself accountable, his team accountable. It's just little things like that. Like he loves breakfast tacos. When they had his little Rookie of the Year ceremony, that was the food that they gave for everybody there because he loved it. And so, him wanting to get a Lego over a fancy sports car or, a new piece of jewelry for his first purchase, it just shows that he knows where his priorities are, and it's impressive enough to say the least. He goes to bed at 9 p.m. every day after 30 minutes of reading that he kind of builds into his schedule. He knows what he wants to do. And I think that, the Legos are it's just one of those little small things that makes him him. And I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was so fun to see that was one of the things he's really passionate about.
My man's is 20 years old and he's going to bed at 9 p.m. What more can I learn from him? Please, what more can I take from his just demeanor? Because golly, I need to be going to bed earlier. What's your most? I mean, you hit the early bedtime. You got the Legos. Is there anything about him more unique than that, or that you're like, oh, I like this aspect of his character the most?
I think that my favorite thing about him in kind of in the media room and things like that is he's always, he makes eye contact with you when you ask a question. He takes some time to think about what it is. Sometimes he'll restate the question. And one of the most fun parts of the job this past season especially has been teaching him new words. Because sometimes we'll say like impertinent was asked to him one time and he'll just look, he's like, impertinent, like what does that mean? He didn't know what the word starstruck meant. He's just so willing to learn, and you can tell he wants to be there in the media interviews, and kind of advocate for himself and his teammates. Like that was one of the things that he made a little thank you video to San Antonio whenever he won Rookie of the Year, because he said that he knew there was going to be plenty of videos and people talking about his award, so he wanted his take to be out there. And so it's just something that he's mature, wise beyond his years. He always takes time to answer your question. He's very thoughtful about it. I think he's a great guy.
All right, so I'm caught between two minds just a little bit with Victor Wembanyama because, and it's only a selfish perspective, so help me. Brandon Miller, best American player in the draft, came from right here in Alabama, and obviously was NBA All-Rookie, had a great season with the Charlotte Hornets, even after getting booed on draft night. It's not fair. Brandon Miller in the same draft class as Victor. Yeah. Right. Did Victor Wembanyama, was he really the Rookie of the Year, or did the name value of, oh, this was the first overall pick and obviously one of the more unique physical specimens we've ever seen in basketball, was that more at play? How would you parse those kind of?
No, it's a great question. I think that for awards like Defensive Player of the Year, the fact that he was included in that, yes, he was an amazing defender, but the fact that he had a chance at winning it absolutely was because of just his wow factor that he brought to the table. Now, for the Rookie of the Year, I'll say that I think he absolutely earned it. I don't think it had to do with just because he was him. I think that it showed on the court, and I say that because initially, Chet Holmgren won 2 straight Rookie of the Month awards in November.
He should not have been eligible either, by the way.
That is a whole thing. I am right there with you. I disagree with the idea of being able to get Rookie of the Year after, because you're behind the scenes, you're working with NBA level trainers, you have a leg up on the company. That's my take on it. But either way, he was his biggest. Chet and Brandon were the 2 biggest competitors for that award. And Victor wasn't winning. It wasn't like he walked in and he was handed every single award. He definitely turned a corner midway through the season, learned to get comfortable and learned to play with players, because that was something that he kind of had to adjust to. Was obviously the Spurs were learning to play with him, but he also had to learn to, he couldn't just have the ball and do whatever he wanted. He had to find a way to work within a system. Granted, the system runs around him, but still. And so I think that he absolutely earned the award. And I think that there were some great rookies in this class, that is his class, that very well could have won it in other years had he not been in there. But I just think that it's going to be tough to win any awards when you're up against him, especially moving forward.
So I'm looking through the Spurs roster, and we already hit, 22-60, not really a good year, but a small step forward from what it was the prior year. I'm looking through the Spurs roster, and all I'm seeing is young guy, fresh name, not a superstar. And that's okay. That's to be expected on a 22-60 roster. Who's the one guy that you say, okay, everyone knows Victor Wembanyama, and look, his highlights are all over your Twitter and whatever social medias that you use. Who's the other guy that you think, okay, people need to start watching out for this guy? He might be young, he might be unknown per se, but in a year or 2 or a year or 3, he's going to be a real key piece to the Spurs team.
I think the biggest one is definitely Devin Vassell. He's relatively young, as you mentioned. One of the oldest players on the team is Devontae Graham, and he's 29. That's very unheard of. The Spurs are the youngest team in the league. And so it's going to be tough to find your all-stars right away. And obviously Greg Popovich, his whole thing is, developing players as opposed to just inheriting superstars. And that's kind of what he stressed last season. That's what he stressed this season. I think that Devin Vassell is going to be one of the players that's absolutely going to be second seat to Wemby on the Spurs squad moving forward. I mean, he's a pure scorer. Popovich has said you can't say enough about what he brings to the table. He's still young, but I think that, I mean, he just got his contract extension this past season. He's going to be with the Spurs for quite some time, and I think as he continues to find himself, he's going to be able to kind of complement Victor, especially with the way that he can score, because he very much has the potential to be a player where if you're double teaming Victor, you're going to get torched by Devin Vassell, And so it's guys like him that I think definitely are on the up and up. Now, somebody I do want to watch is Keldon Johnson as well. Just because, I mean, he's been the best player on this team before Victor was there for quite a few years. And, the best player on a 22-60 team is, you can only be so good, right? He's not up for all NBA. He's not up for all stars, but I think that he is somebody that definitely took a hard hit as far as role went, because he's all of a sudden not the best player on the team anymore. So there's a lot of offseason rumors about where Keldon's going to go. Is he going to stay? Do the Spurs pay him more? And from what I've heard, I've been told that he wants to stay there in San Antonio. So that's going to be an interesting situation to kind of monitor to see, where does he fit into the squad?
We're talking to Matt Guzman, and you can follow him on the Twitter machine at MattGZMan. And you make sure you follow all his coverage on InsideTheSpurs.com. Matt, from this past season, obviously Wemby was the huge story, and a lot of the memories and feelings and takeaways are going to be centered around Victor Wembanyama. But for you personally, covering this season, what's something that, you might be sitting this summer on a beach somewhere, maybe not in Galveston, but on a beach somewhere, sipping a Mai Tai? What are you going to be thinking about? Man, that bleep was awesome. That was a great day for me, or that was a great experience, or I'll never forget this part of last season.
There are quite a few times I was very lucky to have been, in the position I was, especially going in and getting to see Victor Wembanyama. I mean, and the funny part is we're the same age, so I'm looking at him and I'm like this guy is, he's something else. And I think that, there's a few big milestones I was able to be there for. I was there for his 20th birthday when he faced Giannis Antetokounmpo. That was quite a crazy game. I mean, he met Giannis at the mountaintop towards the end of the game, and they lost that one, right? But that was one of the biggest games for them of the season. And I think everyone kind of felt like they were that close to winning. And had they won, it would have been like, yeah, this is the guy, this is the team that we can build on, So things like that, I really remember that game a lot. They played the Celtics on New Year's Eve, and that was that game where he did a skywalking dunk over Derek White, and it just went viral on social media. Just getting to be there for moments like that were definitely really cool. I think by far the most special one was his Rookie of the Year awards show, because he started crying when they played his little tribute video, and he was like, I didn't plan to cry today, and just getting to be there with some of the media, and then obviously the young kids that they worked into the event. It was a community event at the planetarium. They let kids go and hang out with the team, and then he got his award. Just watching the culmination of everything he had worked for that season, and watching him get a chance to kind of own it and be like, yeah, like I'm the Rookie of the Year. Like, I've earned this award in every sense of the fashion. And I think that was super cool. And that was one of the things that I'll really remember, is just the way that how humble he was, how well he carried himself throughout the season, just kind of watching him go through the motions, and learn how to play American basketball, but also just, be himself and be a 20-year-old with cameras in his face everywhere he goes. That's not hard, or that's not easy. Sorry, I'm not used to that. That's not easy. So I was just impressed with that, and very blessed to have gotten that chance to just be there with him and see that.
All right, so for the folks who are not watching the Spurs night in and night out, and that's okay, we're in the conference finals. The calendar is getting to the hottest point, the business end. You got the Mavericks, and the Timberwolves, and you got the Pacers and the Celtics are in the last four. At 22-60, I mean, the Western Conference is a bear. Oh, gosh, it is a huge bear. I'm looking at the standings, and you're like 20 games behind the 10 seed. The 10 seeded, who was it? The Warriors this year, who made the play-in game. What's the gap between, okay, we're the Spurs, we're second to last in the Western Conference. What's the gap between getting from that 22-60 to, okay, we're in the play-in game? We're in the play-in game, and we're growing. What is it going to take for the Spurs to close that gap?
Right. Well, you look at the teams I think this year is a crazy year to kind of use as an example.
It was wide open.
It was, because you had teams like LeBron James and the Lakers that fell to the play-in team despite having the 4th best record last year. And so I think for the Spurs to close that gap, I mean, it's only going to get tougher because a big part of the reason that the West was so competitive this year was because of young guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and the Thunder and Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Jokic isn't going away anytime soon. You've got a mixture of these veterans that have taken over the West and are used to being there, but you're also not joining them with younger players that are only going to get better as time goes on. Now, Victor is one of those players, but he just doesn't have the supporting cast yet for the Spurs to be, at that level. As he continues to grow, we're really going to get to see just how big of an impact he can have on a basketball game. Because, as he said it himself, he's like, this is the worst version of myself. Like I'm playing the worst that I've ever played, and that's true. And so it's something to watch for sure. I think that it's going to take him, but also a few more players to really step up and start to be difference makers on the court. And so, I mean, I don't think that they're far from it. I just think that they need some more time. And, I think this offseason is going to be very telling as to what direction, what kind of method they're going to take. Because Peter J. Holt, the owner of the Spurs, he's already come out and said he wants to build a superpower and he wants Wemby to kind of be the star of that. And so, cool, that's great. But now you got to get there. You got to surround him with players that can help him get there, but also pull their own weight and get the Spurs to that level. So it'll take some time, but I do think that they have the potential to do it.
They've got the potential to do it, but they've also got 2 big assets coming up, in 2 months for the NBA draft.
Right.
You got the number 4 overall pick and the number 8 overall pick from the Toronto Raptors.
Right.
But from my outside perspective, and I'm just reading headlines and getting into things, everyone I hear says this draft is terrible. These kids aren't good. This draft is no good. What's the Spurs mindset to knowing, okay, we got to get another piece or 2, and you got the picks, really, if it was a good draft, or 2 picks in the lottery, hell yeah, that's great. But maybe the quality of the players in the draft this year aren't as good. So are the Spurs considering, we're going to draft at 4 and 8, or are we going to package out of them and try to get maybe a young player instead, or just punt and get to next year's draft?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest name non-draft wise that's been kind of thrown around has been Trae Young. And from what I've been hearing, it doesn't seem that the Spurs are very interested in that reunion, or I guess that union as one might have thought. He's on paper, he fits the bill. I mean, he's a good point guard. He can shoot. He can complement a big guy like Victor. So I think that, I don't think that's fleshed out nearly as much as people might have liked or have thought. So I think the Spurs, what they're thinking right now is just, they're not looking at the draft like this is a weak draft. I wish we didn't have these picks. They got Manu Ginobili in the 2nd round. They got Tony Parker. There are plenty of players that they've gotten that have not been number 1 overall. Now, 3 number 1 overalls, at least so far, have panned out the way that the exact way they had hoped. But just because there's not going to be this big headline name, the Spurs are still going to be treating it like, who can we find? Who is the diamond that we can use that can really help bring us on? I expect them to use that number 4 pick to draft a point guard. Whether that's Rob Dillingham or whether that's somebody like Reed Shepherd, I don't know. But I don't know as far as the 8 goes. I know that they're going to behave as if they're going to use both of those picks. And then if something comes up that's better, a stronger opportunity, they'll do it. I think that that's kind of their mindset right now. But I don't think they're looking at the class as like it's weak. Like, I wish we didn't have these picks. They're just kind of like, well, who can we find and who do we think is going to complement our team the best?
I love me some Reed Shepherd now. Is he going to make it to pick number 4?
We'll see. We'll have to see. I'm very intrigued, and that's the cool part about not having a unanimous number 1. Because you don't know who's going to go. It's truly going to be a surprise, and which team gets to have their guy.
In my prep, I'm seeing Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd. I'm seeing Stefan Castle, and I'm seeing this young man from Serbia, Nikolai Topic, 18-year-old from Serbia. So it seems like there's some options.
For sure.
What's the excitement level from the Spurs fan in the building? Do they think, we're on the right track? Things can go correctly if we hit on these picks.
Yeah. Well, it's moments like the second to last game of the regular season when the Nuggets came to town in San Antonio and the Spurs. And now I think we're going to have something on the site about this soon. I think that was honestly a playoff altering game for the Nuggets because it kind of forced them into that 3-way tie at the top. and it, you know, played out as they did. But it's moments like those where, you know, despite having a 22 and, or I guess at the time it was a 21 and 59 record, you know, they took on the Nuggets and they won. You know, and they beat Jokic, and you should have seen. I mean, that place was celebrating like they'd won a championship. And so it's little moments like that where you kind of realize, like, you know, the Spurs fans are looking at Victor and they're seeing how happy he is with his teammates. They're seeing the way that this team is celebrating, and they know that they have something to look forward to in the years coming. And I think that they've known that. But just seeing it play out, obviously they didn't get to too many times. You know, there was only so many wins they got in Frostbank Center. But it's moments like those where they kind of look ahead and they're like, this is definitely something that we have something special here. And so I think that that's kind of what you look forward, and you don't necessarily need the superstar guy to do that. You know, you can build your team slowly and surely. And so that's kind of what the fan is probably thinking.
All right, so I've been watching the playoffs just a little bit this year, and obviously we hit these are the last Final Four, the conference finals.
Right.
All over my social media has been Anthony Edwards, and he's awesome, great. We enjoy that. But I'm sitting here looking at these last four, and all the pressure to me is on the Boston Celtics. You
Absolutely.
see what their group that they've had together for quite some time, and obviously trading for Drew Holiday. Matt, is it championship or bust now for the Boston Celtics?
I think so. I personally think that Jason Tatum gets a lot of hate, unwarranted hate. And I think Jaylen Brown gets scrutinized. I mean, that entire team has been, it's felt like it's a championship or bust every single season for the last couple of years, but it hasn't been that way, really. Now, I do agree. I think that the Celtics are facing the most pressure because they've entered this playoff run, and everyone's like, well, like they're looking at games like series is like the Bucks and Pacers, and they're looking at teams like Miami Heat, and they're only comparing them to the Celtics. They're like, I don't know why y'all are so hung up on the Knicks and Pacers series. Neither of these teams will beat Boston, you know? And so they've kind of been placed on this pedestal just because of the level of talent they have, the kind of roster they've built. And so I think that all the pressure rides on them because they have to live up to that name of, hey, yeah, none of these guys can hang with us. So they have to prove it, you know, and they almost let it slip against the Pacers in game one. I mean, Jaylen Brown had that amazing 3-pointer. So it was good to see that it was a good game. I do think all the pressure's on them. But I'm honestly curious just to see if there's still that West bias where all of a sudden the Celtics have been cruising their way to the finals and then they meet somebody from the West. I'm curious to see what that looks like.
Do you feel like since you've been watching the Western Conference this year that either the Mavericks or the Timberwolves could challenge Boston?
I think so. I think the Mavericks could play them well. I think that Anthony Edwards, I don't know if he'd be able to will his team to a championship. Now he's got guys like Rudy and Cat with him, you know, but I'd be curious to see. I do think both teams would put up a very good fight. But obviously Boston's a tough team. Now that's if they make it past the Pacers. I mean, they cut it close in game one. So I'd like to see them continue to win some games before we say that. But I think that they definitely, both West teams could put up a fight.
I'm usually not a championship or bust kind of a person because I feel like circumstances are just, man, you're rolling the dice every year and anything can happen. But now that, you know, the Celtics have played Miami without Jimmy Butler, they no more LeBron James in the playoffs, no Denver Nuggets in the playoffs. It just seems like, okay, everything's come up sevens for Boston and they need to take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And if they don't, what will happen to that group?
Exactly. I mean, because that was at the beginning of the season. You have Porzingis, you have Holiday, you have Brown, you have Al Horford, you have Jason Tatum, Derek White as the 6th man of the year candidate. Like this is a squad that was built to win a championship. And I think that, you know, there's something that needs to be done if they can't win this year of all years. Because like you said, I mean, the stars kind of aligned for them. You know, I really do believe that Miami might have won the series with Jimmy Butler playing just because the history that's in that series, you know, but I think that they've done what they needed to do. They've made it to the conference finals. They've won game one. They need to capitalize and they need to move on and win.
All right, let's circle back just a moment to Trae Young. You brought him up as kind of an option. Maybe they're going to maybe the Spurs will make a move to bring him in. And I just want to ask you, do you feel like Trae Young mentally matches up with kind of the Spurs mindset as a franchise?
That's a question I've asked myself many times because obviously his biggest flaw is his lack of defense. You know, he doesn't exactly bring a high level of defense to the table. Now you look at that and you say, well, If he doesn't bring a high level of defense, then somebody's got to make up for that, right? And so you have Victor Wembanyama, already a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. You have Jeremy Sohan, who's a really, really strong defender as well. You have guys like Sidi Sissoko, whose talent hasn't even been touched because he spent most of his time in the Austin G League. But you have strong defenders on that team that could back up Trae Young if they decide to go that route, because his offense, I mean, he and John Collins thrived in Atlanta, and John Collins was like 6'11". So, you have a guy like Victor, and he's such Trae is such a veteran point guard. He's going to know exactly how to get the ball to his man. And so I think that it would work. I think that, the mindset is there. He wants to win. I mean, he has that. I mean, you've seen him in New York whenever he was embracing his Ice Trae villain era. He's definitely shown that he has the heart to play playoff basketball, to play winning basketball. He just he's not by himself enough to will a team to a championship. And I think Atlanta's been kind of in disarray as of late. I mean, you go back 10 years, they're nearly .500 to the dot, all time. And so he just hasn't been blessed with that, the winning roster that maybe Atlanta had hoped to build around him. He would definitely complement Victor very well, but it doesn't. What I'm seeing is that the Spurs they don't really think that pairing would do enough to warrant giving away young assets for it. And so that's it's interesting.
All right, so we've been hanging out with Matt Guzman from Inside the Spurs, part of the Walsh Writing Network right here on the Joe Gaither Show. We appreciate his time. We're going to get you out of here on this, Matt. With the draft coming up in about a month or two, the NBA Combine just ended. What's the story, or what's the angle? What are you looking to tell? What do you want to write about, or what kind of story are you looking to tell to the readers on Inside the Spurs coming up in the next week or two?
I think that as far as the draft goes, I kind of want to take a wider angle approach and look at really how the Spurs are going to want to improve. Will they, or should they, I guess I shall say, should they use their picks the way that they've, been preparing to use them? Should they deal both of them in a deal for another veteran? Will he help them more than anybody in this draft can? Or are there guys in the draft that they should look at that could really be beneficial in the long run? And so I think that's kind of the main story I want to tell, is just what the Spurs are going to do this offseason to improve, because that looks very different. It can look, a variety of ways. So just kind of figuring out which way they're going to take is probably the biggest story I'm looking to tell.
Make sure you follow him on the Twitter machine at MattGZMan, and make sure you're following all the coverage on InsideTheSpurs.com. Matt, we're going to do it again next week, talking more NBA, more Spurs, and we'll find out if we're a little bit closer to an NBA Finals matchup, man. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. That's Matt Guzman joining us, and I really appreciate his time, and I really appreciate Chris putting together a great network of great sites and people to chat with and expand our coverage here. We talked with Austin Bidwell on Monday about the Royals and Major League Baseball, and today was with Matt Guzman and the Spurs and the NBA. So we're going to keep doing that. We'll break into Mississippi State a little bit. We'll break into Missouri a little bit more, and other colleges. So that's going to do it for our show today. I appreciate everybody who's joined us on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. Maybe you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, or Spotify, whatever your favorite podcast platforms are. You can always follow us at Joe Gaither 6 on whatever your favorite social media machine is, and make sure you find the show each and every day right there on Bama Central and BamaCentral.com.
Thanks for joining us on today's edition of the Joe Gaither Show on Bama Central. Keep up with Joe on all his social media pages at Joe Gaither 6. Subscribe, rate, and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and be sure to read us daily at BamaCentral.com.